All right. Hello, friends, old and new. Welcome to the Cantilever How to Build a WordPress Plugin workshop. Today we are going to be exploring a little resource that I've created that tries to teach newer developers how to get into the world of WordPress plugin development. It's going to go over what a WordPress plugin is, how it works, how you would structure one, and then we're going to get into a couple of cool features, things that you can make a plugin do, and how to fiddle around with stuff. I'm hoping that you guys will come away with a neat little resource that you can continue to work with on a day-to-day basis, learn some things from, and I'm hoping to continue to build on it as we go into the future. So it'll be a resource that keeps on giving, I hope. We'll see. But we'll start here. So the first thing that I want to cover, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, is this is the resource that we've created. It is a GitHub repository that is open to the world called WordPress Plugin. I'm really great at naming things. Just wait. So this WordPress plugin essentially is a little tool that you and I are going to play with collectively today, and hopefully it will get you into the feel of what is a plugin, how would I build it, how do I move through those initial first steps of understanding how plugin development works. So the way that we're going to do this is the first thing that you're going to need, and you don't have to do it now, I'm not expecting anyone to code along with me, but if you're watching this on the video later, you could potentially pause it and go along with the process as we go, is you're going to need just a very basic WordPress site running somewhere that you can install a plugin on. So hopefully you have a WordPress site running locally. WordPress development is hard if you don't have a local environment, so this is kind of the one hurdle that we're going to go over in the process. I'm not going to go through setting up a local environment for WordPress with you. I'm going to assume that you can look that up on the internet and get through those initial stages, download MAMP, get WordPress running and that kind of stuff. But once it's running, once you're up and you have a very basic website that's kind of just there and has stuff on it, then we can start to talk about actually working with the plugin. So, plugins, if you're not used to this kind of thing, I'm looking now at the WordPress admin, and in the back end there's a little menu item called plugins, and there's various plugins that'll be there or not there on any given WordPress site. The plugin that I've created is not going to break your site. It's not going to blow it up, so you could put it on any local environment for an existing site and just remove it when you're done, because again, everything is completely self-contained. So the idea of actually getting it running is you're going to take the little clone or download thing. You're going to grab this, which is the actual GitHub piece. We're going to go into the plugins directory of our site. So you can see here I'm inside of WP Content Plugins. We're going to git clone the repository, and it's going to pull the repo, the actual plugin repo, into our local environment. If we ls now, you can see that I have this WordPress plugin thing that is inside of our plugins directory. That's the entire installation procedure. We're going to go over lots of different things in this, and I'm going to get really, really simple about kind of what a plugin does and how it works. But really, a plugin is just kind of a file or directory in the plugins directory that runs some code. It's not the most scary thing in the world. If I pop back over to the WordPress admin, we can look at, I want to talk kind of briefly about roles and responsibilities in WordPress development. Now there's two basic things that kind of comprise WordPress development. You can be developing a theme, or you can be developing a plugin. If you're developing a theme, generally that deals with how content on the website gets displayed and kind of what its typical kind of front-end, back-end web development. So you're writing HTML, you're writing CSS, you're writing JavaScript, you're interacting with WordPress in order to get content, and then you're displaying that content on the site. Every WordPress installation in this year, which is 2019, is going to come with the default 2019 theme, and the 2019 theme content, like the stuff that actually runs that theme, lives in the themes directory and the 2019. And you'll see all sorts of different files in here. We're not going to get into theme development, but generally, themes control the actual display of content on the website. Now, plugins, on the other hand, can, but don't necessarily. Plugins can literally do anything. They can add post types, they can create filters, they can add actions, they can connect to external services, they can do anything under the sun that you can get WordPress and PHP to do. And they keep everything contained so that that functionality is not built into your theme. You don't have to go into the existing theme that runs on your website and hack away at that theme in order to add a new piece of functionality. If you just want to do something that's relatively contained, you can do it in a plugin, and they can coexist in a symbiotic way where one doesn't bother the other, and it makes things nicer. So plugins are a really great way to add additional functionality to a WordPress site in a way that doesn't blow everything up. Now, don't get me wrong. If you write it wrong, you can blow it up, but that's what we're not going to do today. We're going to do it in the nice way. So this WordPress plugin that we have just installed, if you remember, we came over here and we kind of git pulled our plugin in. There's a couple of different ways that you can access a plugin and put it into your site. The first one that you're probably used to is if you go into plugins and you search, you go add new and then you search for a plugin that exists out there in the WordPress space. Now, you have to have a publicly available published plugin in order to get into this list. So this is like if you're writing something for the whole world. If you're writing something just for your website, the most reasonable way to do it is actually to just open up your local environment and drag and drop a directory, a folder structure into the plugins directory of your website. So you can just drag one in. You can download it as a zip file, extract it, and plop it in here. And the last option that we have, obviously, is to use, in this case, we can use Git to get it in here. The point is, all you have to do is get WordPress in. Once we've done that, we can go to the plugin section and we can turn on our new plugin. You can see that we've shown up here with example WordPress plugin. And I'm going to hit activate, and we're going to see some magic. Welcome. Woo! Okay. This is the little feature that we've created, and essentially we've turned on the plugin. It's now active, and now we can do stuff with that plugin. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the source code of the plugin and see what's going on here. So this is our plugin. So I'm in plugins, I'm in WordPress plugin, and then I am in this file here called WordPressPlugins.php. I'll get into how that works in just a second. But the gist of all of this is that we have a whole bunch of comments that just kind of outline what's going on. And I encourage you to take the time after this workshop to kind of read through the comments if you're really interested in learning about how stuff works and how stuff comes together. And read those comments and kind of go through the whole process. But what we're really interested right now is the code. So what is this plugin actually doing? We have a folder, we have one PHP file, and that PHP file has one function that is doing what? It is essentially just writing in this content, what we've got here in these divs, this markup, and it's writing that in on admin notices. So the first thing we need to talk about is the fact that a WordPress plugin is just a PHP file that runs. If I literally nuke this whole thing and I just say, inside of my PHP, I say echo, hi, and then I end my file and I reload over here. If I go into the source code and I type in hi, you can see right at the beginning of the file, we've echoed in hi. So the first thing that I want to kind of get your attention with is the fact that literally a PHP plugin, once you turn it on, is just a script that runs. It is just PHP code that happens. Now, a theme, and I talk about this kind of in the comments, but a theme generally has files that are associated with different views or displays that take place. So if I enter the single.php file, essentially what I am looking at is I am looking at code that runs when I load a single blog post. If I look at index.php, I am looking at code that runs whenever we look at the index of the website or anytime we can't find code to run for another reason. WordPress plugins just run. They just happen. So in order to actually tell your WordPress code when to do things, we have two important things that we can hook onto. We have actions and we have filters. Now, I'm going to get into actions and filters in detail in a little bit, but right now the important thing that you note is that if I go onto the home page of my website and I reload, we don't see that big block that we do in the backend. We only see it when we're in the admin. We don't see it on the front. Why is that? Why? Because we're looking at a specific action called admin notices. Admin notices is an action that occurs. It's a thing that you can hook onto, and it will occur at a certain time and a certain place within the whole WordPress world, and you can attach stuff that you want to do to that action. Now, there's a giant list of actions that I've listed somewhere in the comments here that give you an idea of what the other actions are, but the important thing to note is while a plugin is just code that runs, you can use actions and filters to hook onto those things. And the basic way that you do that is you type in a function called add action. This is a global WordPress function that's available. You identify the actual action that you want to hook onto, and then you provided a function. And this function will run when admin notices occurs. And in this case, all we're doing is we're escaping the PHP loop and we're writing a bunch of markup. Is this the best way to do this? No, probably not, but it is effective and I wanted to get it in place right now. It's a very simple implementation that explains kind of how you would get stuff working. Okay, Andrew, you have created a single WordPress plugin with a single file. How on earth is this a reasonable resource for us to use? Well, I'm glad you asked me. We have a bunch of a bunch of branches in this repo that go over a couple of different things. Right now there's 5, and I'm hoping to build on this as time goes on, but essentially each of these branches, and if you've attended the earlier workshop that my good friend Adrian put on about how to leverage Git, this will be great for you. We have different branches, and each of these branches has a different thing that it's trying to teach you as we go on. So right now, if I grab this branch that I wanted to look at, and we come over to our terminal window, we have to go into the WordPress plugin directory. So if I say git checkout the branch that we want, we now have moved into this new branch, structure 1, file names. If we go back to our WordPress plugin section and I reload the page, we're going to get some new information. When we change branches, we're not actually messing with WordPress. We're literally just replacing the files that are in place. So you can switch branches and your plugin is going to stay on and it's going to stay activated. It's just going to do different things. So this is the first branch that I wanted to go through, and I wanted to talk to you about plugin structure. So if we go back to our editor now, what we will notice, if we kind of go like this, oh, what have I done? Don't save. And now I open up the file again. Hey, we've got new code that is running, and this has changed a few things. So the first thing that I'd like to talk to you about in terms of plugin structure is you have 2 different ways to implement a plugin. Some plugins are very complicated. If you're looking at something like Yoast does a metric ton of stuff to your website and it interacts with it in 100 different ways, and it requires a lot of code and a lot of files to do that. In order to do that, you probably want to have everything in a nice little plugin directory, have your own piece to that. But you don't need that. If you were, for example, to take my WordPress plugin and the file, wordpressplugin.php, and drag it up here into the plugins directory and just let it go. Yes, I want to move it. Now what you'll find is if we go back over here, we will have lost the plugin in terms of it's no longer on. It says it's been deactivated. But if I look at the list, it's still there. And I can turn it back on again. Now, why does this work? Well, the reason is because a plugin can be either a file in the plugins directory, a file, or it can be a directory. So in this case, we have WordPress Plugin and then a number of files that come up. If you're writing a very small plugin that only has a limited scope and doesn't require 100,000 resources in order to do stuff, if it's just a one-file plugin, feel free to just create it as a one-file plugin, and you don't necessarily have to create that directory structure. But if we do want to have multiple files in it, we can. And now I'm going to go back and turn it back on again, because once again our file has moved. And you can see that we have two different options for very basic structure of how a WordPress plugin is put together. The next thing that I want to check out is if we move over to another branch, we can talk about the next super basic structure of the WordPress plugin, and then I'll get into something more fun. I just want to cover a few things here. Check out that. So now we're onto the comment block. So if I reload my thing here, we'll get our new code. This is the new thing that we're talking about here. And the comment block is the piece of code that goes right at the top of a plugin. So you can see this piece right here. Now the plugin name is example WordPress plugin. The description is whatever it is. The author is Cantilever, yada yada. This information that you're seeing here is published inline in the plugin list. So this is how you get your plugin named. This is how you describe to other people who are using the site what your plugin does. And it's how you get your little kind of link over to the website that you really want to pitch, so that when people look at it, they can see the cantilever.co website, because that's the best part of the whole thing. So if you, by chance, want to go about creating your own WordPress plugin, you can go in, and I encourage you to do this, to download the plugin that we've got here, and to go in and change some stuff and call it Rebecca's Super Awesome Plugin for goodness. And if we save that and we reload this piece here, you can see that it's now properly named, and we have kind of a real name for our example WordPress plugin. I encourage you to go in and play with these and, take a picture of it, maybe send it to your mom. You are officially a WordPress developer if you can get this far. Let's save that and move on to something a little bit more in-depth. So the first thing that I'd like to show you is how to build a shortcode. Let's actually build part of a website here. Gimme. Got it. High mouse accuracy. Get reset hard head. Give me feature shortcode. All right, let's do it, people. So the next thing that I want to kind of talk to you about is okay, so we've got the very basics of what a WordPress plugin could be. Let's talk about what a WordPress plugin can do. Now, in this case, what we're doing is we're going to try and create some structured markup for our client. So our client has a problem. They want to add specific styled blocks of content to their existing WordPress posts, but they don't really want to have to write out the code themselves each time in order to make that happen. So if I was a WordPress developer, I can go and I can create a new page, and we'll continue to see these little pop-ups while we're here. I can create a new page here, and I can call it my super new page. And if I wanted to put in, let's just say, an article tag, and I wanted it to have a title, so we'd have like an H2 with a title, and my gosh, this seems like a lot of work for just kind of adding content. Do you really expect the client to be able to do this? No, this is like really complicated stuff with HTML tags that you don't necessarily want to force your client to do. If they leave a tag open, it could break the rest of the page. If they want it to be green, then you have to go in and say, oh, okay, well, I guess from now on we have to stay style, color is green, Like that's kind of gross. You don't want your client to have to do that, but we can create structured markup and we can potentially offer them a solution where they don't have to do all of this markup, they just have to do a tiny little bit. So one of the ways that we can do that is we can offer them a shortcode where they can put in something really simple, much more simple than what we've got now, and it will output the exact same content on the front end when we actually do stuff. So let's right now just grab a bunch of content, lorem ipsum. We're going to take just a little bit of content, like that much. We're going to put that onto our page. We're going to publish it. And then we're going to go and we're going to view the page. So what have we got here? We don't really have a whole lot. We have a page on our website that has some content. That's not super exciting. Let's go build stuff. So if we go back over here and we look at our shortcode thing, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to create something like this, where you can say, start an article block. It can have an optional headline. It can have content to it. And then we want to close off that article block so that it looks nice. So how would I create a shortcode? Any shortcode. This is one example, but you can think of 100 ways to put a shortcode into content. How would we do that if we were trying to build it on the back end? Well, first of all, let's take a look. So we have a couple of things that are going on here, but really, if I get rid of this admin notices thing, the only piece of code we're running is this. So we're not doing a whole ton here. We're adding in a little bit of functionality, and we'll explain how this works. Now, the add shortcode function itself is a globally available WordPress function that allows you to create your own shortcode. And what I've done here is I have tried to provide as many comments as possible, that's why there's a lot of green text, that outline what we're actually doing in the process of building this shortcode. So just to give you an example, we want to create a new shortcode called article block that's going to write some content. So the first thing we do in our add shortcode function is we name it. We call it article block. This is the tag that we're going to use in line in order to be able to provide that hook to the editor. The next thing that we're going to do is we have the option to be able to pass along attributes and content. Now, shortcodes, if you're not used to them, come in a couple of different implementations. The first one is you can have something like shortcode. And shortcode just does a thing. It doesn't have any content inside it. You see the word shortcode. Let's just say if we wanted to input a random GIF into our website, you don't need to describe a whole lot here, so you could just say a random GIF as an example, and this shortcode would run. There are no parameters to it. It's very simple. And if we go back here and we actually change this into like random GIF and run some code after it, that could happen. There are also some other ones where if we want to do article block, we don't just want to put in an article block. We also like spelling. But we want to be able to wrap content in something or provide content to that. So article block. Now we're creating a two-piece with an open and a close. You may notice this looks a lot like HTML. It's very similar, but instead of using angle brackets, we're using square. And now we can pass in the content. So essentially what we're doing here is we're declaring a function that runs whenever article block is called. Okay? So article block, those match, good. We have a function that runs whenever it is called. And if we don't need any attributes or content, we can literally just provide an empty one. And then this is the script that runs after. But we can also provide content. That's the wrapped stuff in here. And we can also provide attributes. So if we wanted to be able to change the color of the text that happens inside of this article block, we could provide something like this, color equals green. So now we have content to our shortcode, and we have a parameter to our shortcode. So we have content for our shortcode, and we have the first parameter on the function is the attributes that get passed. And these get passed as an array, so if we have multiple, you'll have color green, and you can have background equals red, and Ty won't be able to see anything inside this block as a result because he's green-red colorblind. But the idea here is that we can provide a series of attributes to our shortcode and pass that along. So the next thing that's going to happen, and I'm not going to go really deep diving onto the functionality here because again, you have the opportunity to come back and look at this, is we are going to set some defaults. So we have the opportunity to take the existing attributes that we have outlined from our editor. So whoever's writing the content puts in the attributes they have. We can merge those with defaults. So if they're not set, we can set them for them. So we can essentially know what kind of data is going to be coming to our shortcode. And then we merge those two together into our options. So now if I'm looking at this, I have a color of green because I've declared it. I have a background color of red because I have declared it. And I have no headline because I didn't declare it, but I will have a key on it that says we don't have one, so don't make one. The next thing that happens is we have the actual stuff that occurs. Now, in the case of a shortcode, what you want to do is you want to take some markup. So we're going to put some markup into a variable, and then you return that variable. And what WordPress will do is it will take the instance of the shortcode, delete it, and replace it with whatever markup you just asked for it to create. So here, we're going to create an article. We're going to give it some stuff. We're going to put the content inside, and then we're going to close it off nicely so that everything gets wrapped up in a nice little bow. And our client on this end can update their page and go over here, and they will get this really ugly box that shows up on their screen with red background and green content that's completely illegible, but the markup, my friends, is beautiful. The markup is not ugly. It actually uses an article tag, and it has some breaks inside because we've done that. And, you know, the structured markup that we needed, that the client wanted, that's there. So now we have essentially replaced the need for this with some other stuff. So what else can we do? We can add a headline. This is another attribute that we can put together. So I can put in really important info, and I can write in I'm red, green, colorblind. And if I hit update, we'll get a new headline that's put on top. It's pretty gross, I know, but that's a structured markup idea. So we have now that, we should really change it because that is utterly gross. If I scroll down and I just say the color is black and the background is CCC. Now we have content people can read. Yay. So that's essentially how we put together a shortcode. And you can see that from the actual code that's running itself, we have used a function in order to declare our shortcode, declare the code that runs through that shortcode, and then we have returned the markup that we have created in order to get that onto the page. The last piece that I want to quickly talk about while we're here is if we go over here and we check out one more branch of this, and I encourage all of you, if you want to do this and dig through this repo because it does have a few neat things in it, and play with the source code. That's the fun part. If you don't play with the source code, you're probably not getting everything that's available here. We'll try one more thing. We're going to create a feature, and we're going to leverage filters. So we've talked about actions, and actions are code that runs at a given time, but there are also filters. So we're going to look at a couple of different ways in terms of how filters and actions interact in this little implementation. And I encourage you once again to take the time after this workshop is done, go through this and dig through and get a firm understanding, change some code, fiddle around with it, make it your own. It's only through really doing that you're going to understand. Just watching someone do it is not the most fun. So we have a couple of different actions that we're leveraging here. If I go back to the plugin thing and I reload, you can see we've pulled in the new header that talks about what's going on. We have a list of hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds of filters that affect every single part of WordPress that you can hook onto and you can modify the content of. Whereas a action in WordPress is literally just a flag that someone pops up and says, this is happening now, does anyone want to do anything? And you can hook onto that flag and say, yes, that's me, I want to do stuff now. A filter is applied to content, stuff that already exists, and it's a similar type of thing. Once that content is presented, the flag goes up and says, does anyone want to change this before we move on? And you can say, I would like to change that before we move on. Shortcodes are implemented as a filter that WordPress hooks onto itself and then does the replacement of. So we have the similar opportunity with a ton of different stuff within WordPress to leverage filters to change stuff that's on the website. For example, many of you will create your navigation through the menus option. So you can, in here, if I knock this down, you can create your website navigation through the menu structure, but you can also make changes to this menu structure based on certain logic by leveraging a filter on the navigation items. I don't know exactly what the filter is, but I've done it a couple of different times, and you can look it up in that giant list that I provided. So we're going to leverage a couple of different actions and filters here to do things that we want to do. Now, the goal of what we're doing in this exact thing is, if any of you have ever used WordPress, you will know that the, not WordPress. If any of you have ever used YouTube, you know that when you embed YouTube in a page, it calls a whole lot of stuff randomly as you load the page. And it doesn't wait to see whether or not you're actually going to use it or not. It just does it. So here's an example page that I've put together right now, and all it has is just a ton of content on the top. And then if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll find a YouTube embed iframe. That's all it is. It's just a plain standard YouTube embed iframe. And if we run this normally, what it'll do is as soon as you get to the top of the page, it's going to load in 20 different resources required by YouTube in order to render that iframe, which can slow your website down. So what we've done is we've leveraged actions and filters in order to change this content, add in some JavaScript, and essentially defer loading of this until we actually get to that part of the page. So if I scroll up to the top and I open up my page in a new link, you can see that we've got lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of content. And then when we get down to the bottom, there's a block. Oh wait, we're going to load it in. Yeah, I did that. So now we want to talk about how that happened. I'll take just a few minutes. You'll have the opportunity to go through this. So what we've done here is we've created a filter, and the filter that we're talking about is the content. The content is a filter that runs on every post content that goes through your website. And essentially, with add filter, you have the ability to identify the content that you want to have a discussion with, that you want to change. You can pass that content into our function. We can change the content by doing a string replace. And then we return that content back to the filter and we say, I'm done with it now. If you don't do a return, you're going to essentially hijack the whole set of content and erase it because you haven't given it back. It essentially thinks that you've replaced it with a null string. So what we want to do is, using our add filter function, we take the content, we get it as a parameter to our function, we then change it. So what we're going into is we're saying replace the SRC with a class and erase the SRC and kind of add in some data, replace it with a data SRC. So we're kind of hijacking that piece and moving it over so that we don't have a source for our iframe when it first loads. And then we pass it back. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use another action that we've talked about before in order to run some JavaScript. So we're going to say, I want to load some JavaScript files, so I'm going to hook onto the action WP-InQ scripts. WP-InQ scripts runs twice, actually, once in the header and once in the footer, and allows you to inject scripts that you want to run on any given page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject jQuery. It doesn't exist by default and I want it. And I'm going to inject my own JavaScript file called deferred video. And essentially what deferred video is, and you can look at it if you want, is it basically just says, if there are any deferred videos on the page, don't load until they show up on the screen. That's it. So we've leveraged one action and one filter to do some things to the content of our post or our page to change it to make it better for our client. That essentially kind of covers the basis of what we've got here. Now, my plan is to improve on this going forward, to continue to add little features and functions that you can use in a WordPress plugin. But this gets you started on the very basics of what a WordPress plugin is, how you get started, and how to get over the initial humps of building out features for your website without having to dig through the theme. So, I guess what I'll do now is I'm going to stop sharing and I'll open it up to questions if we have any. If I haven't lost you.
Hey, thank you. One question I have is around security.
Yes.
So plugins are often a source of security issues. How do you kind of make sure that your code is not becoming a problem in that way?
There's a couple of different ways that you can approach that. I'm not a security expert, but one of the ways you can do it is essentially you can say if someone calls, there are a couple of different examples of this, but if you can put a line at the top that says, if you are calling this code directly, just fail. We only want this code to run in the context of our own WordPress thing, so we definitely want to ensure that if you're not in a WordPress context, don't run. And then the second piece to that is essentially you can leverage kind of boilerplates or other content or other kind of structural pieces in order to get a good heads up on doing that. But I mean, I'm not in a position to be able to advocate for specific security strategies on kind of such a low level intro lesson, right?
We do have Ty as part of philosophy. As you know, I've got those PHP code sniffer rules all set up, and that does include some that catch really glaring WordPress security stuff, like accessing the database directly without going through the prepared statement process. So it'll catch things that might cause SQL injection attacks and stuff too.
Any other questions?
I have another one.
Okay.
When do you decide to build a plugin instead of, implementing something like directly in, like in traditional WordPress development? For people who are watching this, they're probably used to like writing a quick function in a theme file or something. In our case, we have our controllers and models. What's the line for you of when you decide to go that way?
My suggestion would be that, especially if you're using, it's going to depend on kind of how you approach it, but I think the bar for entry on when to choose a plugin is actually extremely low. There are a couple of tests that you're going to run. The first one is the entire, is it central to the functionality of the website? In some cases, if you have a theme and unless this functionality is present, the theme doesn't really work, then I would include it as part of the theme. Second of all, if you're using a third-party theme, like a theme that you have purchased and you expect the ability to be able to upgrade it over time or replace it with newer versions of the same theme, that represents a good opportunity to move your functionality into a plugin, because if you just kind of plop in the replacement theme, you're going to overwrite all of the entries in your functions.php. So that's a bad thing. You then have to think about it a little bit harder. The last piece is this functionality that I'm creating universal or something that I could apply to another site if I need to? And if that's the case, once again, it represents a great opportunity to create a plugin, because the next time you need functionality like that, it doesn't even have to be exactly the same, but just even something like it, you can take your existing plugin, plop it onto the next site, change it to be able to make it however you need it for that specific implementation, and your work is 3/4 done. You don't have to re-implement it in the theme or dig through old source files in order to make that happen.
Cool, thank you very much.
Cool. All right, well, if you haven't already, if you're watching this on the video, please go ahead and check us out, cantilever.co, or look at us on Twitter at twitter.com/cantileverco. If you're interested in working with us, whether in a development or design sphere, or if you're just looking to work with us as a client, please feel free to reach out to us at hi@cantilever.co. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you coming out. Almost got through it.
Yay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Ciao, everybody.
This was great.
Thank you.